All right, you ready to dive in? The Fall's back at it again with new facts emerge, and let me tell you, 40 years in, they're still keeping us guessing.
It's incredible, isn't it? Like trying to pin down the Fall is like, well, it's like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
Ha! Perfect analogy. And we've got a stack of reviews here. The Arts Desk, All Music, The Quietus, even God is in the TV. They're all over this one.
Yeah, it's like they threw a sonic grenade and everyone's trying to pick up the pieces.
And a lot of those pieces revolve around Marky Smith's voice. We're seeing words like slurring, incoherent, even growl. Pretty intense for a band known for, well, you know, that distinctive vocal style.
It's definitely got people talking. I mean, Smith's voice, that's always been such a crucial part of their sound, right? That kind of spoken word, almost monotone delivery over their music. It's iconic. But yeah, this time around, several reviewers are pointing out a change. The Quietus went so far as to say phlegmy growl, which...
yeah, not exactly a glowing endorsement.
Not really. So it makes you wonder, is this intentional? Is Smith pushing his vocals in a new direction, or is something else going on?
Right. And that ties into this bigger question that keeps popping up. Are we getting a reinvented Fall? Or just more of the same old, same old? Because, you know, some critics, like We Are Cult, they're calling it practically perfect, praising how it blends familiar elements with something new. And then you've got the AV Club, which basically said, this is one for the back of the shelf.
See, that's what makes the Fall so interesting. You never quite know what you're going to get, and people react so strongly.
It's true. And it's not just about Smith's vocals. We're seeing all these terms thrown around to describe the music itself. Rockabilly, funk, avant-garde, even psychedelic. It's like they're daring us to define it.
They practically invented undefinable.
All right, well, let's get into the nitty-gritty then. Let's talk tracks. Starting with, well, the 1-2 punch of Segue and Folderol. Now, Segue is brief, more like a palate cleanser almost.
That's the stage.
Exactly. But then Folderol, wow, We Are Cult called it utterly terrifying.
And you know what? They're not wrong. It's intense. What's interesting is that they compared it to Rocket from the Quipped, specifically their song On a Rope. Even suggested it might be a little homage.
Huh. I wouldn't put it past them. The Fall always have these unexpected influences. Okay, so then we've got Brillo de facto. You know, the Fall, they've always had this knack for writing these almost danceable grooves.
Yeah, and God is in the TV really highlighted that. They called out the funky bass line, which, you know, you don't usually hear funky and the Fall in the same sentence. But they're right. There's this syncopation, this really cool driving rhythm.
Yeah.
And then,
bam, that classic Fall chaos at the end.
exactly, just this torrent of noise, almost like they couldn't help themselves.
Never a dull moment. And just when you think you've got them figured out, Victoria Train Station Massacre transitions right into new facts emerge. Almost like they're messing with the formula, blurring the lines.
Which makes sense, given the times. I mean, The Quietus made a good point about how 2017, when this came out, there was this feeling of anxiety in the air, this sense that reality was kind of fractured. And you can feel that reflected in the music, the way these tracks flow into each other. It's almost unsettling.
Definitely adds another layer. Okay, but if we're talking about unsettling, we have to talk about couples vs. jobless mid-30s. This is where things get, well, let's just say even diehard fans might need a minute to process.
Oh, absolutely. We Are Cult described it as a horrific wall of mirrors and suggested listening on headphones to get the full effect. They even talked about feeling like they were trapped inside Marky Smith's head, which, honestly...
Yeah, that tracks.
But what really struck me was how they drew these parallels to Can, you know, the band. Specifically tracks like from Tagamago and Soup from Ich-Bum-Yassi. Like, those are some seriously dense experimental pieces of music. So to see those references pop up in a Fall review.
Says a lot about what they're doing on this album. It's not just surface level stuff.
Definitely not. This is music that demands you really dig in.
So are you ready to put on those headphones and face that horrific wall of mirrors?
How about we take a quick breather and come back to it?
Back again. Ready for more new facts emerge. So the first half of this album, it's a wild ride.
Yeah, like a roller coaster through a sonic funhouse.
Perfect description. But then we get to the second half, and it feels like we've entered a bit of a lull.
Well, lull might be pushing it, but yeah, there's a shift. We've got Second House Now, ZDSCTRRK Man, Gibbous Gibson. God is in the TV. Even went so far as to call him catchy.
Catchy. Not usually the first word that comes to mind with the Fall.
Right.
Right.
But, you know, there's this element of, I don't know, almost rockabilly in places.
Okay. I can hear that. A little bit, but it's like even when they're giving you something that resembles, a traditional song structure.
There's still that edge, that feeling that something's not quite right.
Exactly. Freak called it a fractured rockishness, which I gotta say is pretty accurate. And they made an interesting point about how the band seems to, disappear at times into this wall of noise.
They can't help themselves. It's like this urge to disrupt. Even when they're giving you something you can almost tap your foot to.
Like, here's a melody, but we're gonna bury it in feedback, just for fun. Speaking of which, we can't forget Grounds Boy and the Two Amendments. That whole cut the grass Grounds Boy thing.
It's classic Marquis Smith, right?
Yeah.
Just this weird, almost hypnotic phrase that gets stuck in your head.
And you're never quite sure if it means something profound or if he's just messing with you.
That's the beauty of it. It sparks all these interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting in itself, right? Like, what is it about the Fall that makes people want to dissect every lyric, every sonic choice?
I think it's because at their core, they're just so uncompromisingly themselves. They don't play by the rules, and that makes them endlessly fascinating, even frustrating sometimes. But hey, that's part of the deal.
You know what you're signing up for.
Exactly. Okay, we're running out of runway here, and we haven't even touched on the album Closer yet. And this one, oh boy, this one is something else entirely.
9 out of 10. Yeah, if the rest of the album is like wandering through a maze,
Yeah.
this is like stepping out into a wide open space.
It's sparse, it's raw, it's almost unsettling in its simplicity.
Definitely different.
You were saying how 9 out of 10 is like stepping out into an open space. It's a good way to put it. Because the rest of the album is so dense, so layered. But this one...
Like they stripped everything back to the bare essentials.
Exactly. Just Smith's voice and this really simple repeating guitar line.
God is in the TV called it lo-fi slow rockabilly, which,
It's not what you expect to hear when you put on a fall record.
definitely not. But they're right. It has this really stripped down, almost intimate feel.
And the lyrics are interesting here, too. I mean, when you've got lines like 9 out of 10 is what they gave me, and I was an awful baby, it feels very personal.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability there that you don't always hear from Smith.
Right. It's almost uncomfortable, but in a good way. Like it makes you lean in and really listen.
Totally. And it's not just the lyrics, it's that the vocals only last for like the first third of the song. The rest is just Peter Greenway on guitar, this kind of haunting, repeating figure.
It's almost like a soundtrack, like for a movie that only exists in your head.
The Arts Desk described it as one of the most intriguing songs they've recorded in recent years. I'd have to agree.
Me too. And it's a bold move, ending the album on such an ambiguous note.
But it wouldn't be a Fall album if they didn't leave you with a few questions, right?
Exactly. So as we try to wrap our heads around new facts emerge, because let's be honest, it's a lot to unpack.
Definitely a lot to digest.
Where do we even start? Is this classic Fall? Is it something totally different?
I think ultimately it's both. And that's what makes it such a fascinating listen.
The Quietist called it sharp and absolutely dangerous. What do you think?
I think that about sums it up. New facts emerge. It's not easy listening. It's challenging, it's uncompromising, but it's also rewarding if you're willing to put in the work.
Well said. And in a world that often feels over-sanitized, overproduced.
A little predictable.
Exactly. This album is a breath of fresh air, or maybe a punch in the gut. Depends on your perspective.
Maybe a bit of both.
Probably. So to all our listeners out there, you've heard us go back and forth about new facts emerge. Now it's your turn. Give it a listen. See what you think. Does it resonate with you? Does it leave you baffled?
Oh, maybe a little bit of both.
Probably both. Anyway, that's the beauty of the Fall. They never fail to spark a conversation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring those sonic landscapes.